the definition of a man is someone who can do both, and a true man knows when to do which. We've lonelied ourselves to death, right? We've drank ourselves and Netflixed ourselves to death. I think where parents have to be careful especially is if you go through life, if that can quickly turn to coddling. If you try to take struggle away from your kids, it's theft. You're stealing from them. If you try to make them feel better, that's theft. You're stealing from them. They have to sit in that discomfort. The challenge is, can you sit in it with them without trying to solve it for them? That's the magic.
But as we were saying, yeah, Minnesota was great, man. We got to get you out on one of these hunts one of these times here.
Dude, I have to so bad. Did y'all get anything this year?
Well, there was 10 of us, and I think everybody got something except for me. That's not true, but it feels that way.
That's so good, man. What
an
adventure. Yeah.
It is. I love hunting. You got some hunting in this year, though.
Yeah, I've been a bunch. I've been more than normal. I needed it more this year. And rifle season starts for us this weekend. So my son comes down the stairs, and I just started yelling, 5 days, and he started cheering. So yeah, it's kind of a big deal.
How old's your boy?
He's 14.
Oh, perfect age, man.
Oh yeah, I've been taking him since he was 4. So he watches his old man get pretty feral in the months of November and December, and so it's good.
I bet. Does he hunt himself, or is he just there to tag along and enjoy the process?
No, he's been every year since he was about 6 years old. I've been letting the leash a little bit more and more and more. And last year he started being able to sit in his own blind by himself. And he's too cool for blinds. He thinks they're unfair, so he likes to just sit in the woods and mono. So yeah, he's got that 14-year-old. There's that great quote from Mark Twain. That when I was 14, my dad was the stupidest man I'd ever met. But when I ran into him again 7 years later, when I turned 21, I was astounded at how much my old man had learned. It's very much like that. Like he's like, you know what, Dad, actually, and I was like, all right, cool. So he's got to figure those things out. But yeah, it's a holy time for him and I. So it's good.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's funny. You're going to let him go out and chase whitetail. It's like, you can go sit in the woods. You're not going to shoot anything. But if you feel like a man, by all means, get after it.
No, because then I hear the rifle go off. And then I get a message on our little walkie-talkie like, got one. I'm like, golly, dude.
Oh, so he's killed animals before.
Oh, yeah. He's way better than me, man. It's embarrassing.
Awesome.
Yeah, he doesn't have the he's got my dad. My dad was the SWAT guy, and he has my dad's. Everything slows way, way down for him, which is kind of cool. Got to teach him how to hunt.
My oldest is like that, actually. I get really anxious. I get worked up. I get buck fever. And then I take my boy out, my oldest son. I've got 4, but, I've got 4 boys, or three boys and a girl. But my oldest son, he's like that. Everything is level-headed. Everything is calm, cool, and collected. He doesn't get worked up. We went to Africa and hunted earlier this year.
Yeah, I saw that. Was it wild? Good time?
It was amazing. Yeah, and he was just killing animals. And I'm like, are you excited? He's like, yeah. I'm like, we don't seem excited. He's like, I'm excited. I'm like, be excited about it. But he's just so level-headed and so cool, which is why he's a way better hunter than I. You said it's embarrassing, but I mean, I can't speak for you, but for me, my son's a better hunter and a better a lot of things than I am. I'm never embarrassed. That's actually what I want. He doesn't know that, but that's what I want for him.
Yeah, that's the right way to say that. Yeah, I when I hear the shot go off, I pump my fist because I know he's just better at it than me. He's quiet. He makes perfect shots, and when he doesn't, he's the guy that will be there for 4 hours trailing until he finally tracks it down. But he, you said it best. There's nothing better when your sons, especially my daughter's pretty amazing, but it's just different. My son, when he displays the characteristics of the things that I struggled with so much growing up, and I know the hell that I went through, and I still continue to go through on some things, and I see it, a new branch forming on our family tree with him, and it makes all that exhaustion and scars worth it. It's pretty cool.
What would you say are the things generally, and we can dive into some of this at a more deep level, but what are some of the things that you feel like you struggled with that he may not have to struggle with? Obviously, external circumstances, but what about internally?
My great-great-grandfather died at 10. My grandfather was a World War II vet, and my dad was a hostage negotiator and a SWAT guy. So I grew up in the lineage of men who were some of the most amazing men in their communities and in their country and their local churches. They were just amazing guys. But if you open up that toolkit for, can you let your son know that he's tethered in and he's safe and that he's loved? I mean, those tools weren't in the kit. So my son, for me, it was a conscious, I will hug my son every single day of his life. And that's awkward for me, especially now that he's taller than I am. I will dip into the awkward and make sure he knows here's how we treat people, and I'm going to explain it. And I'll be the first to tell him I believe in him when he messes something up. And so it's the external stuff is kind of the easy stuff. It's the internal stuff. And so he does not operate from a place that he ever wonders whether he's loved and he's connected. And not to no fault of my dad or my granddad, I just spent my whole life trying to make sure everybody saw me and that y'all love me, right? You love me, right? And it's this constant either seeking affirmation or trying to find some numbing device to quiet it, and giving him the opportunity to go take on this crazy changing world, but anchored into something that he knows I can always walk in that front door because those guys love me.
The physical embrace is weird. My son's bigger than me too, and it's like you're leaning into his chest versus the other, the way it quote unquote should be. He's leaning into you. Yeah. It is a little weird. I can attest to that.
Do you ever think? We crash into each other. There's two big old boys now, man.
Do you ever think that there's any sort of, or maybe even just in your research, any sort of downside or detriment to the idea of, I'm trying to think about how to say this, but embracing our children in this way relative to the way that maybe our fathers or grandfathers did, where it was like more hard-nosed, tough love, toughen up, man up, do what you're supposed to do. And now I think there's a greater push for let's embrace all of our children, not just our sons, in a more compassionate, empathetic way. Do you see any negative side to that, or have you seen anything with that?
The greatest real world example I can give you is I don't know how long you've been following mixed martial arts, but there was a team called Chutebox, Chutebox, and they had some of the legends, the OGs, Vanderlei Silva. They had Shogun Rua. They had some of the wildcats, and they were known back in the like Pride fighting days in Japan and early UFC. They were known they were just killers. And their practices were legendary for, they would just massacre each other. That they were just these insane knockout nights, and they would just beat each other to a pulp, and they'd come the next day and beat each other to a pulp and come the next day. And that made them assassins, especially early on as the sport was evolving. Now those guys can't move. Those guys can't, they have bad CTE. They can't move their joints. They are really struggling. And so there's this idea that I will create a tougher version of you by beating it into you. And I think what the science is telling us and what real life is telling us is you can actually go do harder things and more terrifying things for longer and more accurately better if you're anchored. Right, if you are anchored into something that you know that a chain that you can't break, and then you are free to rappel off the side. So, no, I think it's the inverse. I think where parents have to be careful is if you go through life, if that can quickly turn to coddling, and man, if you try to take struggle away from your kids, it's theft. You're stealing from them. If you try to make them feel better, that's theft. You're stealing from them. They have to sit in that discomfort. The challenge is, can you sit in it with them without trying to solve it for them? That's the magic.
Well, that's a good point, because I've noticed in my own fathering that when I know one of my children needs to be corrected or disciplined, I'm not as readily available to do that, whether it's mentally, emotionally, whatever, not because I'm worried about their own feelings, but because I'm worried about mine, if I'm being honest.
Mine, that's right. Yeah. I grew up, my dad was a cop, and then he became a minister. We didn't have any money growing up. And then my mom had a year where she was sick. We had less than no money. And I remember a year somebody broke into our house from our local church, and they put tons of these amazing presents under our tree. It was a really cool thing, but it haunted me too, right?
They broke into your house to do that?
Yeah, it was awesome. A really cool thing, but also I carried a lot of shame as a middle school kid. Like, oh, we're that family that people have to like buy us gifts because we can't afford any. And so I've had a different kind of life growing up, and my son has, and my daughter has. And it was just 2 years ago. It was awesome. It was 2 years ago. I sat down with my son and said, hey, I need to make some changes. This year starts a year when you're not going to have 1,000 things under the tree, because I've been buying you gifts for me, not for you. And so I'm going to get you a couple of nice things, and we're going to go do some things in our local community, and that's going to be Christmas. And you know what my 8th grader said to me? He said, Dad, I don't think you can do that. And he smiled. And so he had already figured it out, right?
Yeah.
He'd already figured out Dad buys me a bunch of stuff because he needs to feel better. So yeah, if parents can learn to sit in the discomfort, then we teach our kids that discomfort's not a bug, it's a feature, man. It's part of life. And if your kid loses a jiu-jitsu match, saying, it's okay, it's not. It sucks, you lost. But I will never not be here with you when you lost. Like that, you're not going to go through loss alone. And I think you're not going to sit in that suck alone. And I think that's where parents can show up.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think there's a real paradox. You know, I was watching UFC 309, I believe it was, on Saturday night. And these are some of the most hardened, to go back to your point earlier, some of the most hardened athletes. I mean, these guys are athletes at the finest sense of the word, and they're disciplined, and they're committed, and they're dedicated, and sacrifice, and all the things. And for whatever reason, I've seen this before, but for whatever reason, it really stood out to me. Before one of the fighters went out to compete, his trainer, his head coach, whatever, kissed him on the forehead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in any other context, dudes would say that's gay, no homo, like they would mock it. But in that context, not a single soul on the planet, I think, if they're being somewhat just observant of what's going on, would ever mock that. In fact, I thought it was pretty endearing that somebody would have that level of affection with another man on a platonic level, and then send him out to go get his face bashed in. It's a very interesting paradox to me.
Yeah, well, I think it's because we've become somewhere along the way we labeled masculinity, we labeled strength as distance, right? As the Lone Ranger, as this distant figure that needs nothing, and I just think that's insane. Like we've lonelied ourselves to death, right? We've drank ourselves and Netflixed ourselves to death. And I think it was Terry Real that wrote a really extraordinary book called I Don't Want to Talk About It. But in that book, he talks about going to visit with a really tough tribe. I think it was the Maasai tribe in Africa. And I'll get the name of that tribe wrong. But ultimately, they were one of the few remaining warring tribes. And he noticed how insanely affectionate they were with their sons, holding hands with them, hugging them, kissing them all the time. It's very different. And so he asked him through an interpreter, and basically the guy said, the definition of a man is someone who can do both, and a true man knows when to do which, when to go to war, when to be really firm with accountability, and when to be very loving and endearing. And there wasn't a either or to that. It was a both and I just loved that picture.
I think that men have this romanticized version of what masculinity is, and I think it's been fed into us by culture. John Wayne, John Wick, Jason Bourne, the Marlboro Man. These guys are all James Bond. They all start with J for some reason, but where it's, hey, I'm not supposed to work well with others. I'm supposed to work well on my own. And do you feel like in ancient civilizations, you mentioned a couple of tribes here, that it was like that? Or was it more that these tribes were, from a masculine perspective, more physically affectionate, more connected that way, in a way that I think we, generally speaking, in society today would kind of be a little bit repelled by?
Yeah. I mean, I'm fairly, it's been a few minutes since I've looked at it, but I'm pretty sure the Greeks, they trained naked, right? I mean, there was lots of dude on dude action with those dudes like doing wrestling and stuff. So Yeah, I think this Lone Ranger myth is one of the most insane things we've cooked up in the Western world. That's never existed in human history. You always went to war with a band, with a gang, with a tribe. And your people, I'm reading Empire of the Summer Moon right now, and I can't believe it's taken me so long. As a Texan, that's an abomination, right? But the Cherokee tribes, as they developed their horsemanship and they took over, nobody went out by themselves. That's never existed. That's why it's such a silly myth, and it caught on, and it became the way of our world, right?
Do you think we're jaded? I kind of feel like we're jaded. You know, I talk with thousands and thousands of men every single year, and so many of them, a large percentage, in fact, I don't know if it's the majority, but a large percentage think that they need to do life alone. Or even in a romantic relationship, that being in a romantic relationship puts them at risk, unnecessary risk. Marriage, for example, is shunned by a lot of these guys. And why would you ever get married? You can't rely on anyone. You can't trust anyone. Do you think it's a level of narcissism or just being jaded? Or where does this idea that we need to isolate come from?
I think we've got a generation of men who were raised by this is my hypothesis, dude. My mom was not allowed to, by law, gosh, I'm going to get out on some real thin ice here. My mom was not allowed to have a checking account by law, right? Without my dad's signature on it. My mom was not allowed to get a mortgage. This is my mother. This is not that long ago, right? And so the next generation, right? I'm in my I'm heading into, I'll be 40. I don't know how old I am, 45, 46. I'm in my mid 40s.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah. But there's a generation where for the first time in human history, women were told, like they were denied these just basic human freedoms forever, right? And then they got them. And then the next move was, hey, you know what's more important than being a part of a system is economic security, your career, and then when you get that stuff leveled out, then you can go get a family. And men were told, man, if we could just get back to the way they were, both groups were lied to. And so now you've got a generation of person that was raised in a single home or in a two-parent working home, and so all the derivatives from those challenges there. And the most core tether that you have, like talking about what we were talking about earlier, when you have nothing to anchor, then the most painful moment in your life is the relationships that should have been the most stable to you. So why in the world would you double down and do that again as an adult? Especially, we've got this little sliver of history where we don't need other people to survive. I can hit a button on my phone and food just shows up. I got running water in my house. Those things plagued humanity for all of our existence until 100 years ago. And so I don't have to have people anymore, theoretically, to get basic needs met. And the cops show up reasonably when you call 911. So we've got security taken care of. So we've got these things that have plagued us forever. And so we have this illusion that we don't need other people. And then we got the internet, and we got pornography just pumped into our houses. And we've got these fake friends these imaginary friends on social media stuff. So we've got Twinkie calories coming in. It's keeping us alive. And we're not healthy, but it's keeping us alive. And but I think it comes from, dude, if your dad was more interested in work than you growing up, if your mom was more interested in making a career than you growing up, if you knew existentially as a child you were a bother, why in the world would I entrust half of my estate to some woman who says, I do? I'm not going to do that. And there's no way. It wouldn't make sense to do that. Here's what's funny that you asked that question, Ryan. It was 18 months ago. I was at a book signing after an event, and somebody asked me a question that haunted me to the point that I got home and asked the person I work with here, get on Amazon and order every book with the word marriage in it. Every single one of them. Here's the question I was asked. Is it still worth it? And I started to say, yeah. I was like, yeah, I mean, it's the most, and they stopped me and they said, hold on, your marriage has worked out okay. Is it still worth it? And Ryan, I didn't have an economic answer. I didn't have I didn't have a good grounded answer for that question. And so it haunted me. And I've been on an adventure the last 18 months. And I go down rabbit holes, man. Trying to figure out, like, do we still need relationships anymore? Has that ship sailed? And now we're going to have AI assistants. Do we need that anymore, man? Or has that ship just sailed for us?
That's a really interesting question, because if you would have asked me 3 years ago, I would have said unequivocally yes.
Yeah.
I think there's still data to support, from an economic standpoint, for example, that yes, marriage makes sense from an economic standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, after the 18 months, I'm more in it now than ever.
More on pro-marriage side.
Yeah, than I ever were. I'd never
gone
down that rabbit hole.
Because I'm not as much on that side as I was 3 years ago. So what makes you say that?
The data says if you have a good marriage, especially for men, every facet of your life, you have more sex, you have better sex, your economics work out better, your health is better, you live longer. But if you have a bad marriage, every one of those metrics falls off a cliff. And so I think we've made it an either or, and just said, you know what, I'm going to opt out, and I'll take 70% over the potential 100%, but that I avoid the negative side. So my thought is, if I've got something out here that's great, I need to learn the skills to do this thing great. But I do, man. If you've been burned, I getting back in that fire, it has to be the most terrifying thing I can imagine.
I don't think that anybody who's being honest about the discussion would disagree with what you're saying. I think the argument, and this is one of my arguments, is why does it need to be a 3-party agreement? If I'm dating, for example, if I'm dating a woman, can I have a quote unquote marriage without the quote unquote government certificate saying that we're married? Can I have all the benefits and have the life and have the thing without the government getting involved? I think that's where most of the men, that's a little bit how I feel. And I think that's what most of the men I talk with about this stuff, that's where most of them land.
Yeah, I think the the person who pushed me the hardest on that was Jordan Peterson. We were going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and he kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me. And I said something I've never said to anybody, and it never even occurred to me. But he kept saying why, and he kept pushing why. And finally I said, because I made a covenant. I put a line down in the sand, and I did it with my church, and I did it with my God, and I did it with my government. Like, I put a covenant into earth. And so my initial concession was yeah, I get that. I don't want the government telling me where I can live, what I can do. I don't want the government telling me anything these days. And if I've got my local church, that's good. Most people bounce church to church to church if they even go anymore. I think I know myself well enough, and I think I know human nature well enough to know if you don't have an anchor point that says there's no coming back from this, then the option you're going to take the off ramp.
I would agree with that. I think that having
you have to burn the boats at some point.
I think having and I think Jordan is, based on what I know of what he said, he would agree with this. And correct me if you think I'm wrong, but that there's something to be said for having a ceremony, having an agreement, having third party, not intervention, but involvement, which says I have made a covenant before other people and before a God, that it's a little bit more solid than, hey, I fully commit to you. And it's just, I commit to you, you commit to me, the end.
Right. Yeah, that becomes like a high five ceremony. Yeah. I think a covenant is, here's what happens if this thing's violated. Right. And so that's the modern contract. And I didn't know this till I worked at a law school, that most contracts are written to be broken. They're just simply a path for when this thing dissolves.
Yeah. So, find the angles, right?
Right. In our current world, I tell people all the time, don't buy a house with somebody you're not married to. There's the faith component to that, which is fine. The morality part of it, fine. And we can disagree on that. But man, if you don't have, if you're married, there is a separation protocol. If you're not separating estate, separating kids, separating child, it gets to be a nightmare. And so right now, currently, getting married with the government, having a government certificate gives you, if somebody burns you, cheats on you, hurts you, is violent with you, it gives you an off ramp that just a simple ceremony wouldn't do. So that's just me thinking out loud here. But you're posing some good questions that I need to make sure that I lock in there pretty good.
Well, I would say the other consideration, and I already hear people chirping in my ears right now when it comes to giving you an off ramp. I know what they're going to say, and I feel this. It gives women an off ramp, but let's not be coy. It doesn't give men the same sort of off ramp that it gives to women.
Oh, anytime you follow a culture that increases women's rights, you increase the number of divorces because women finally have to stop putting up with abuse and infidelity and all these other things, and they start off they take the off ramp. So I think there's a both end of this. One is men have to learn new skills in the 21st century. Relationships have changed forever, and you are correct. There are men who get burned alive, dude, and that so far in the courts it's not equitable. I was with two men who are navigating messy divorces right now, and it's just heartbreaking. Like, they have all the facts, they have the forensics, they've got the text, they've got everything, and their attorneys look at them and say, I don't know how to tell you this. It doesn't matter what you have. You will lose this engagement. Settle. Yeah. And it's horrific on my side. Like, listening to this going, what? That's just not justice. And they're like, there is no justice here. Everyone loses here, but you lose the most. Settle. And I knew that, but seeing two people that I love and care about go through that right now, it's even more like, good God, this stuff still isn't any better. So there's truth to that. I don't know that I don't know you get the benefits of a lifelong, I don't know that you get the benefits without going all in and work. And I don't know you get the benefits of anything without the risk of getting hurt, is what I would say. And if you hedge your life on, I might get hurt on this, or they may screw me, then you're gonna spend your life mowing lawns by yourself. That's gonna be the extent, because you won't have business partners, you won't have romantic partners, you won't have kids, you won't have any sort of risk financially. You'll just sit in a round room painted in non-fume paint. I don't know what I mean. Just gonna sit in there in a risk-free environment.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I'm also glad that you clarified. I in no means was suggesting that a woman should subject herself to abuse or cheating or anything like that.
No, I didn't get that at all.
I was talking
there's
more
legions
about
of men
the court
who've gotten,
system of that. Right. Sure.
Oh, it's awful. It's awful. Yeah. It's horrific. It's horrific.
But I've also, I mean, to be fair, I've seen the other side too. You know, my mom, for example, and other women in my life who I have seen absolutely get, railroaded financially, and not have their side of the equation represented either. So, I mean, it goes both ways. I'm just speaking in broad generalities here. Yeah,
people hurt people. I have an admitted bias because of one conversation I had with one woman one time who was in an abusive marriage, and I said, you have to leave. And those are words I never say. And I said, you have to leave. And she looked at me with a sort of rage that I didn't understand. And she said, where am I going to go? How am I going to eat? And it was essentially, she was saying, for my kids' safety and for food, this is my price of admission right now.
Right.
And I didn't
sacrificing.
I didn't have an answer. And it was I bet I can rally up some guys and we can go burn this guy to the ground, right? But the bigger thing is there is a position, there's a hierarchy. If you're a woman who's dedicated 3 decades of your life to raising kids and a stay-at-home mom, which is the rage these days, right? That is a vulnerable position. There's just no way around it. And so, I'm admittedly biased, and I'm walking with 2 very successful male buddies right now as they navigate hell, and they're just getting run over in the court system by 2 very challenging divorces. And so it's a mess. It's a mess. I just go back to I don't know that anything's good anything good in your life comes without great risk.
I agree with that principle wholeheartedly. You said no hedging is the term that you use, and I think about that in business. And people have told me, what if you lose money? Well, yeah, I mean, there's a very real possibility that I will. Or I've thought about that. Man, yeah. I mean, the relationship that I have right now, an incredible woman. We've been together for about a year. She could come to me tomorrow and say, "Hey, I'm out." Right. Was that a wasted year? Yeah. Depending on how you look at it, you might say yes. I would say no. Like, I'm willing to risk that because of the thing that we actually have together. Yeah,
absolutely not. You know what, Ryan? A buddy of mine. He's a banker. Same haircut. He's one of those dudes that we all have in our life. He's got the same haircut since he was like 4 years old. Same type of jeans since he was 4 years old.
Old soul.
He's the most consistent human. He's a walking Xanax. He's the most consistent guy I know. He's amazing. He's a very successful banker in Texas. And I remember one time I was going back and forth, my wife, like house and this, and hey, if I buy a house here, though, we can flip it in 2 years. And I was all about this ROI stuff. And he finally looked at me and said, hey, 30-year friend, by the way, buy your wife a home. And I was like, what? And he goes, get your wife a home. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, there's a few things in your life that are more important than an ROI. And so a year or 2 years or 72 years like my grandparents, all in, both feet in the boat with a romantic loved one is worth it, even if you get hurt. Because you learn about yourself, you learn connection, you find yourself in places you never would have been before. Same with a home. There's some homes that you buy and it doesn't make a bunch of sense, but you don't put yourself at risk, but you give your family a chance to drop their shoulders, right? And so I think that falls into that. If we start ROIing everything, it's a pretty hollow way to live.
So on that, when I hear that, there's a sense of satisfaction that this friend of yours has in life. He's satisfied with life. I don't know that he's complacent. I don't know him, but he's satisfied.
No, he's incredibly aggressive, but he's satisfied. Yeah.
So what's the balance though? Because like I think about, I drive a 2015 3/4 ton GMC. I drive down the road just about every day and I see a 2022 3/4 ton white GMC and I want to buy that thing so bad, but I refuse. Not because I can't, I can. Yeah. And it's because I'm satisfied with my truck. I'm not complacent about it. I'm satisfied. I have a truck that does the job. I don't need to go spend another 80 grand to get it done. What is the balance between satisfaction and complacency?
Dude, that's the greatest question. Lane Norton, I think he's a mutual friend of ours. He's the weightlifter guy. He's awesome. He says most people spend their life stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. He said, if you're 40 pounds overweight and you're listening to the red light therapy and the microplastics conversation, you are stepping over dollars to pick up pennies, right? Lose the 40 pounds and start sleeping well, and then let's start tinkering at the edges here. In a similar way, there's people who live in an apartment or they have put 1.2% down on a house that they can barely afford, and they have a car lease and they've got consumer debt, and they're out there trying to have Bitcoin conversations. The difference is Nassim Taleb talks about barbell investing. You have to cover your home. Owe nobody anything on your house and you're free to do anything. You're free to tell your boss, I'm not doing that, which then in turn your boss is free to go, I need more guys like you on my team. You're promoted, right? Or he can fire you.
Yeah, it's ironic because you're going to get more of what you want from other people when you do it that way.
Always. So if you will cover your four walls, if you will take care of nobody can take your house from you, nobody can take your car from you because you own it, then you're free to rappel off the side and go be really risky or infinitely more risky. I was able to, after 15 years of working my way up the ladder at this university system, to quit everything to, as my son says, go be a YouTuber. Because we'd covered the foundation, right? And I think most people are just scurrying around the margins without dealing. They're stepping over dollars and they're stepping over $100 bills to pick up pennies, because it's sexier and it's fringier. Dude, if you can make peace, I have a 2006 Tundra. Every time my boss, Dave Ramsey, sees it, he just shakes his head. He's like, what are you doing, man? I know. I see your paycheck. I know.
Yeah, but that's surprising. He would say that, though.
Well, dude, his Raptor's dope. It's real nice. But like, it is when you cover that, when you can be okay there, then you can go do anything, right? And so I think that's the difference between complacency and risk. You're not being complacent when you can drop your shoulders and say, I'm at peace. People come at me all the time, dude, on the show about, can't believe you'd pay off a 3.2% mortgage when you could put it in that money in a high yield savings account and make 5.1%, dude. That's 1.9%. You're stupid. You don't know math. It's like, bro, there's a 2% sleep tax. There's a 2% soul tax. All right. You know what I have in my life that you don't have? Peace. Because nobody could take my house now. Forget it, right? And so there's this. I think people just aren't playing the right game, and I'm solving for peace in my house, dude. And that means I leave money on the table. That means I leave adventures unhad, but that also means the next time you call me, I'm going to Minnesota, dude. I'm going to hang up out of a tree for 4 days, and we're going to tell hilarious stories and chase other guys' deers into the woods because we've covered the foundation here, right?
I think that's a good point. I mean, even to go back to that, this year I took my oldest son to Africa. All in all, with flights, tickets, mounts, things like that, we're 20 grand into it.
Yeah,
and I had a couple people. Man, I wish I could go. I wish I could do that. How do you do that? How do you do that? I'm like, 20 grand is $1,600 a month.
Yeah.
You get 2 car payments, some student loans, some medical bills, and some consumer debt, and you're at $1,600 like that. I don't have any of that.
Yeah.
I have zero. That's so right. The $1,600 that you spend on all your cars and your other stuff, I just spent on a trip to Africa. It's not like you don't have the money. It's just it's a consideration of priority. You're prioritizing the car. Right. I'm prioritizing the experience.
And I love this. This gets overblown a little bit, but if I have a North Star, I sure love asking myself, what's the story that my son's going to tell at my funeral? And I remember my dad had a blue car and a white car. But man, your son will tell the story of the time Dad took me to Africa to go hunting. He'll tell that at your funeral. That's a part of his nervous system now, and that's more important than any flashy thing. And I told my son the other day, hey, I'm going to fix this truck up. It's going to be your truck when you're 16, and my old truck. And he got in it, and he goes, no, don't fix anything. I like how it smells. And I thought, this doesn't smell great. This is our hunting truck. And he's like, no, like this is how I like how it smells. And it's about priorities, man. It's about priorities. Good for you.
That smell is interesting. I've got a 99 Toyota Tacoma as well that I bought in 2001. I'll never sell the thing. And I get in there and it smells different, but it smells like memories to me. Like,
it's
I
unique,
love that
man.
thing
It's
for
the
that
same
reason.
smell. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. You've mentioned a couple of times this concept of anchoring. And I think I get the concept when it comes to anchoring to your parents or, something as you were growing up. But how does a man who feels like he never had an anchor in life find an anchor today at 40 something years old?
God, that is the question. Can I just be pretty straight with you? We have the most untethered generation, I think, possibly in human history right now. And we are nothing but frustration and rage. And God almighty, dude, there is a bad outcome when a whole bunch of men devote themselves to the art and act of rage. So if you find yourself untethered, we have pulled the string on medicine. We've pulled the string on faith. Nobody goes to church anymore. We pulled the string on education, and we've pulled the string on work. We've become slaves to technology. We've become slaves to money that we've borrowed. You've probably heard it like, well, my dad was mean to me growing up, so I'm never going to Christmas again or Thanksgiving at the house, or my mom didn't make me a gluten-free dish, so forget her. Like, dude, we are untethering ourselves, and men unspool. We do not do well. We're not tethered in. So if you didn't have good anchoring as a kid, like millions and millions of people didn't, fine. The question you have to ask is, what am I going to do next? You have to get a gang. You have to get a purpose. You have to take a knee before something bigger than you. I think it was Tony Robbins years ago that talked about one of the differences between young men in the Middle East, especially in war zones, and I don't want to paint a big, broad Middle East, but in war zones and in the Western world. And there was this sense that there's an inspiration to build something, or there's an inspiration to tear something down. And the goal is, I want to be like my neighbor. And if you are in a community that says you can build as high as me, then you will. And if there's a situation where you say, I can never build that high, the only option I have is to knock it down. And so we are fast approaching the anchoring we have now is to unspool everything. Facts, truth, honesty, virtue, and burn it all to the ground. And dude, what we're going to have is we're going to have an entire culture sitting in ash, man. And that's just not a good place to be. So you got to find a gang. You got to find a community that's big, in service to something bigger than you. You've got to stop seeking pleasure at every second. And you have to not seek grind for the sake of grind, but grind in behalf of something as some sort of downstream reward for you and your family and your legacy. You got to plug into something bigger than yourself, man.
Do you feel like a man can anchor to, in the absence of physical anchoring, whether it's a relationship or a circumstance, can anchor to values and virtues, like honesty, for example, at the core, or maybe it's a belief, like a belief in, like a faith, for example, where I'm going to anchor myself to God's word and his control and his hand in my life, or I'm going to anchor myself to just doing the right thing and then just letting the chips fall where they may because it's just what I believe. Can a man do that?
You can, but it has to be done in community. You can't do it by yourself. Otherwise, you end up with the Marlboro Man, the guy in real tight jeans with a cigarette and a hat out there that looks cool in a black and white photo ad standing next to a square body 82 Chevy pickup. It looks cool.
It does look cool. I actually want that now that you say that.
I want that truck so bad. I know. I want that. I want that. In the shotgun rack in the back. I want that. And he's got lung cancer. And he's alone. And he has no one when he goes home. And his house smells like crap. And he's got wood paneled walls on the inside of his trailer. It's not a good life. It's a great photo. It's not real. And so, yes, I think men can anchor to value. They can anchor to faith. They can anchor to a series of principles. Ryan Holiday's Stoicism stuff has taken off because people are so desperate for a set of principles. Yes, you can, and you have to do it with a gang, with a tribe. Otherwise, you're untethered. And you get that, my sense of virtue, where does my sense of virtue stop and yours start unless we do it collectively, unless we do it together?
How does a guy turn a tribe into an anchor, though? Because I don't think...
You have to go through hard stuff. You have to go do hard things.
There's a lot of guys who are like, I have friends, I have guys at work that I hang out with and get a drink after, or I go to the game with, or like, and I hear what you're saying. I don't think you're wrong, but what does that look like in practicality? Let's say I've got 5, 6, 7 guys around me. We all work together, or we're in the same neighborhood. Like, how do I elevate that into something that's actually going to serve me versus something I'm just kind of dinking around with and I happen to catch the guys in a beer on UFC night every month or something like that?
Sure. It's as simple as what Michael Easter talks about. For all of human history, we had scarcity. Now we have abundance. We have to do something different. We can't just say, oh, man, there's food everywhere, so I'm going to eat it all because we're gonna be dead, right? So similarly, men never had the option of only seeing other men once a month to grab a beer and watch some fights. They had to build barns together and cut hay together and not die together. That was their life. And so we don't have to do that anymore, so we have to inject that. Here's a simple way I've seen it done that was one of the most raddest things I've ever seen. A group of guys back in Texas, in Abilene, Texas, they had this deal where once a month they put names in a hat and they drew a name out. And let's say they drew Ryan Mickler. They said, all right, in the last Saturday in December, we're showing up at Mickler's house. You are responsible for all the paint, all the whatever, screws and whatever, and 14 to 30 men would show up at your house. And one of the other rules was if you had sons, you had to bring them. And they had to show up so they could see their dads, have friends and do things. And like a buzzsaw of men would show up at each other's homes and do everything all in one Saturday. They would grade an entire yard, paint a garage, put on a new front end bumper. They would do all this, like change the plugs out, and the wives would get in all this, making lists. And then the guys who were still there at 3 o'clock or at 5 o'clock, you had to provide the beer, the food, and all the stuff you needed. At 5 o'clock or whenever everybody called it, whoever was left got their name in the hat, and everybody showed up at your house the next month. And what happened over the course of a year or 2 years is everybody kind of learned how to put a plug in. And everyone learned how to, because one guy knew how to do that, or a couple of guys knew how to teach you how to cut in on painting. And slowly a whole community lifted up. And those are guys I still talk to this day, right? There's a few of those guys I still call and talk to this day. And so, but you learn new skills. Your kids got to see you have friends and learn skills. They got to see you make fun of each other. They got to see you eat pizza for breakfast. They got to see the first guy open a beer at 10 o'clock and everyone make fun of him. And then everybody kind of also do that. They got to see all of that when it was cold and it was hot. And it saved everybody thousands of dollars. in having to hire all this crap out. And so you and I, we can, whether we have the cash or not, we can pretty much get what we need done at our house right now because we have access to just endless amounts of credit. What I would challenge the average man listening to this podcast to do is find something at your house you need done and ask a couple of guys to come help you, however awkward that's going to be. And if you don't have anybody that could come help you, therein lies your challenge. Go solve that problem.
That's pretty powerful, man. That's such an easy, I've never done that, but I'm like, dude, I got to do that. You know what's ironic? You were talking about wives. What's ironic about this is all the guys complaining about not getting any. All those wives of men are dropping their panties at the end of the night for guys that are actually going out and serving other people and doing what they should be doing outside of just the relationship. So you're getting so much more out of just being involved with dudes. Like you're going to be well connected to your kids, well connected to your wife, well connected to your community. Powerful stuff.
And you know how to do a thing. You know how to do a
Fair
thing.
enough. So
when your wife says,
boost.
man, this plug doesn't work, instead of saying, well, you need to call the electrician. Yes, there is something profound and simple about saying, well, let me go look at it. And you taking the plug plate off and looking at it and be like, oh, I need to get a new plug here. This little end is burnt out here. God almighty. That your wife feels like, oh my gosh, my husband knows how to do a thing. That's not it's become a signal of virtue. Like, I don't know how to do anything around here. That's not a thing to celebrate. Right? It's not. It's not. And my arrogance, no matter what my travel schedule is or how much media I have, or how many books I've got, I will mow my lawn every Saturday. Well, that's arrogant and stupid too, right? Sometimes you need to you hire some help out too. So there's a balance there. But my gosh, learning how to do stuff at the feet of other men is so great, man.
I think this is why all of us just get kind of excited about, watching an Amish barn raising on YouTube or Instagram or whatever, because you see these guys come together and they're putting barns up in an afternoon and you're like, that's amazing. But we could do that. We could actually do that if you spend a little time focused on it.
And you can get a group of guys that just goes fishing once a month and everybody has to pick a new spot. And one guy's going to pick a terrible spot and everyone's going to make fun of him for the next 4 years over that once. And that's part of it. And one guy's going to get lucky and pick a spot, or you can travel across the country and meet a group of guys that you don't know. And it's really easy to bond over hunting and what kind of bow do you use and why do you use that kind of stuff. And it's freezing out here and Mickler still hadn't got one yet. Right. I mean, that's the true. Good stuff. Right. And everybody dressing the deer out and you take some, I got enough in my freezer already. That's the stuff. That's the good things, man. It's so great. And that sounds overly outdoorsy and that's not fine. If that's not for you, that's great. Hey, can you help me with this particular website I'm building instead of just hiring it out? Can you come over to my house and help me with this thing? I don't know how to set up my speakers. I don't know what the thing is. Just stop outsourcing every human transaction and see if you can get some people that will come over and help you.
I mean, I would push back on the website thing. Like,
I know.
But the only reason I say that is just because the inside stuff, the technology stuff, I don't think people are lacking, and I don't think there's a lack of information or know-how or stuff rallying around that. Like, go do something that's, if you're like, I don't like hunting, then go hunting. I don't like to hike, then you should go hike.
Go hike.
Like, if all you ever do is, I'm going to build a website this weekend, or I'm going to, watch Lord of the Rings series with all my buddies. Like, probably you should do something else.
Even if you're the guy who was my mixed martial arts coach, every once in a while he would go to this big park in the middle of the city, and these guys would dress up in these medieval things and
LARPing, man,
crap out of each other, dude.
Yes.
I would much rather be in an MMA gym than with these dudes. They had these big wooden sticks and they were just wailing on each other. So whatever it is, don't watch Lord of the Rings. Go play Lord of the Rings, but go do a thing that's hard and that you have to learn and engage with other people, right? And I think that old, it's a gendered trope, but it seems to still work, is that women often bind together socially, kneecap to kneecap, and men bind socially, shoulder to shoulder. And I think that plays out over time. So go find ways where you can get involved. Ask your friends to help you move instead of calling a mover. Do hard stuff together, man.
Outside of bonding together in tribes and groups and gangs, are there other issues that you recognize that are generally specific to men? I think that, I just did a video because I work a little bit with Daily Wire and Jordan Peterson and promoting some of Peterson's work. And talking about the suicide rate, which is 4 times higher for men than it is for women. Now, a bunch of women came in and said, well, we do it more often than men. You just are more successful at it. And successful is not the right word I would use in that case.
Like,
and it's also not a competition.
God.
But okay.
Yeah.
Point taken. But the point I'm making here is that it's alarming how many men are killing themselves. And is it simply because of isolation, or are there other factors at play?
It's soup to nuts, dude. It is. I did not know how to be a dad. I didn't know how to be a dad to an infant. I was angry all the time. No one ever told me. I didn't know that a 9-month-old is a bundle of nerves that doesn't have any use for a dad, and I took it very personal. And so early on, I knew I'm going to go make money, and that's going to be the greatest gift I can give my son, because I didn't know what to do. I didn't have the skills. All the way to education systems that are designed like specifically for the mind of young women, which I have no problem with, except that it leaves men behind. So it's not both and.
Right.
Yeah, it's at the expense of. And so you walk through a system where you are a failure factory. Or if you are successful, if you figure out how to navigate these systems that are not designed for you, there's a penalty to be paid there too. And then you take out movement and you pathologize just normal adolescent male development. And then there's this ethos. It's the water we drink and the air we breathe, that every problem on earth is because of you. Because of you. Everybody's not safe because of you. The climate, because of you. Everything is because of you. And then you get to a workforce that says, all right, now you've been coddled your whole life. Now it's you versus everybody. Go. And I don't have a psychology for everybody's been coming into the gym and taking the weight off the bar my whole life because it was so painful. I literally don't have the strength to compete in a pretty brutal marketplace. And so, and then my wife doesn't need me. She doesn't know how to say I need you. She doesn't know how to say the words I'm proud of you. That's not part of her psychology growing up. She's just been taught that anything that she feels bad about is my fault. It's a nasty, gnarly world. And so I see men checking out and checking out and checking out and checking out. There's just there's an end to rage, and there's an end to numbing behaviors. And those are the two paths men have been given the last 25 years. Be angry about everything, or just numb it all. And dude, there just gets to be an end to that.
Again, to go back to, outside of the gang and the tribe type mentality, because I think a lot of the issues that you talk about can be addressed, not solved, but can be addressed and approached through having other competent, hardworking, hard-charging men in your corner.
Yeah.
Have you read The One Thing by Gary Keller?
I haven't, no.
It's a really good book. I read it years and years ago, and it was a transformative book. And the premise of the book is basically, what is the one thing that you could do today that would render anything else obsolete or make everything else easier? And I think in the concept of what we're talking about today is having a tribe of men like you're talking about would render a lot of these problems obsolete or make them a whole lot easier to address. But are there other quote unquote one things that men can do to tackle a lot of these problems and issues we're dealing with at once?
Yeah, I think there's the complete opposite angle of that, which is it took me 15 years and almost blowing my marriage to smithereens before I finally got it through my big, thick skull. My wife was not with me simply for my utility. My wife actually loved me. And she saw me through the utility, and I could not hear it. I didn't have a psychology for it. So there is a skill set, number one, or demand. You have to go find a gang of men that you do life with, that y'all are productively adding to the community that you live in, whether it's a faith community, a world community, a school community, I don't care what it is. And you have to be able to learn new skills with how to talk to and engage with your kids, how to talk to and engage with childhood traumas, how to talk to and engage with your romantic partner, with your wife. You have to learn to do those things. And it's not either or, it's both and. And you're incomplete without either of those or one of those. And the teeter-totter will get balanced the wrong way. So you have to go out and do those things.
But
by the way, it's easier for me. It's easier for me to go make friends, to go get a gang. much easier for me to do that than it was to sit down and learn how to engage with my wife.
Oh, of course. I think the odds, at least the perceived odds or the risks, I should say, are not quite as prevalent with, hey, if this friendship doesn't work out, no big deal. If this marriage doesn't work out, that could be the end of the world, right? So, of course.
Yeah, but just go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, just to push back a little bit on what you're saying, you said it took me a long time to figure out that my wife loves me for me, not through my utility. But then in the next breath, it sounded like what you were saying is go learn new skills, go serve your community, which are very utilitarian. So how does a man find value in himself?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Not just for my skills. So it's both and. So I think those who say utility is stupid, men don't need utility. They don't need to be useful. They just need to be lovable. That's dishonest. It's not true. And the other side of that is I had to learn new skills to be able to, and I guess, yeah, if you follow it all the way out, there's a utility there. I had to learn how to, here's me as being as vulnerable as I can on your show, dude. I was sitting with a trauma therapist going through some gnarly stuff that happened in my childhood that I'll never talk about it publicly, but it was not great. And she golf clapped me. And obviously,
sarcastically,
yeah. If she was, we were laughing, we were having a good time.
Sure,
but,
right.
But she's an older woman. She just clapped, and I was like, "What?" And she goes, "I've been wondering, and you're right. I was right. You're smarter than me." And I was like, "What? No, stop." She's a savant. She's brilliant. And she goes, "You've read more than me. You always have an author you can cite when I ask you a question." She's like, "You're smarter than me." She goes, "So next time in therapy, we're going to say no words." And I said, "Well, I'm smarter. Now that I'm smarter than you, like, I know that therapy is about talking." And she started laughing. I started laughing. And she said, "John, you have all the answers, but you can't sit confidently and peacefully in my presence." And that's when I was like, oh, damn it, dude. Every breath I took was a performance. And so I did not have the skills to be still and just accept my wife's love. I didn't have the skills to let my daughter nuzzle up against me while I'm watching a show and let her nervous system co-opt mine and just have a safe place. I was an anxious nuclear reactor, all right? My chest was always hot. And so my son did not have an anchor. This is what masculinity ultimately is, a stillness, right? It is I'm confident enough that I don't have to be electric all the time. And I didn't know how to do that. It was a set of skills I had to practice. And so I guess technically that's utilitarian, but I had to go learn how to do that. I had to learn how to listen to my wife and not try to solve her problem. She's smarter than me. She was Dr. Delony long before me. I'll never be as smart as her. She doesn't need me to solve her problem. She needs me to be there and listen so that she can anchor in. I had to learn how to do that. I didn't know how to listen to somebody without being like, "Oh yeah, you know what you need to do?" And with guys, we do that all the time, and we don't listen to each other, so we just roll our eyes and like, "That guy's an idiot." But I didn't know how to do that, so it was both and.
Well, I think what I'm hearing you say is that utilitarianism is the byproduct of, in your case, just being confident and comfortable with who you are. So it's not the means, which I think generally meant, and I've done this too, where it's like, I got to provide, I got to fix the car, I got to pay the mortgage, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And if I don't, then I'm not loved and I'm not appreciated and I'm not respected. So I have to be competent. Versus, I think what you're saying is that competence is just a byproduct of all the other work, and that will come, but it's not the goal in and of itself.
Yeah, and now that we can all take our work home with us, now that we can all get side hustles and we can work from home, we can have 3 full-time jobs working from home if you want to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, go to bed at midnight. But what it's become is it's become heroin. It's become a numbing device that gives us an excuse to not plug in with our kids, with our families, with our communities. And so we do have to provide. We do have to have that terrifying question that I didn't have a psychology for, which is like, there's a famous showdown my wife and I had in the garage after my second book. Like, she's like, "John, we have enough." And I remember yelling, like, as she walked out of the room, I remember, like, not yelling at her, but yelling, like, what the hell's enough? I didn't know what that, I never even thought of that word, right? And so there's this idea that we can work and work and work and tell ourselves, we're just providing. If it's not for me, there's going to be. That's true. That's actually true. And how often have I stayed at work till 7 or 8 o'clock? Because it's just easier here, dude.
Yeah.
It's just easier here. I don't want to throw the Frisbee with a 7-year-old, and I don't want to get onto my son because his pants are on backwards or whatever he's trying to do. I'm just going to do another thing here. And I can tell myself it's because I'm paying the bills.
Well, to be fair about the book story and the infamous blow up or whatever you had with your wife, books are a horrible, horrible strain on relationships. So anybody who's out there, and you could write the best stuff in the world, all the things that you should do in a relationship, and it will destroy your relationship if you let it.
The greatest gift you can give to your marriage is don't write a book.
Totally.
Yes, just don't.
Totally.
Amen, dude. Golly.
One of the things that I've been learning, I haven't learned, but I've been learning, is just being able to say, I don't know, or I don't have an opinion, or I don't care about that, is a superpower.
When you just said, I don't know, the next one you said, I don't have an opinion on that, Ryan, I literally felt my shoulders go up around my ears. I just felt it, right? Yes, that's exactly right. I don't know. And I don't know where we got in our heads that our value is based on having some answer. But that's the word. I don't know, man. But it's false. It's fake. It's not real.
Yeah. Well, brother, I love our conversations. Hopefully we can have a little bit more personal conversations on a future hunt or something like that.
Dude, I love that, man. Don't give up on me. Keep calling and asking.
No,
I'd
I
love
won't.
to go, man.
I'm going to get you out there. I'm going to come knock on your door and drag you out of the house if I have to at one of these points. So,
where are you living now?
I'm in southern Utah.
Like St. George area?
St. George, yeah, just outside of St. George.
No way. Okay.
Don't tell me you were just here.
Times. No, it was about 2 years ago, but I'm in Utah 4 or 5 times a year now, so I'll swing something up. We'll figure something out. That'll be fun.
Yeah, let me know. We'll make it happen. All right, brother. Let the guys know where to connect with you and learn a little more about what you're up to.
You can just follow me at John Delony. Actually, you know what? Get off social media. Just get off. You can watch the YouTube show or the podcast, the Dr. John Delony show. You can check that out only after you watch the Order of Man show. Then you can check that out while you're headed home. But
you got to hit all 1,600 episodes or whatever it is before you start listening to John Delony.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Are you familiar with Cal Newport?
Oh, yeah, I know Cal.
Cal's amazing. I mean, he's a big advocate of not being on social media. He's an amazing person.
His there was his latest book tour. There was 2 episodes that he put out that I paraded around here, that we had spun up some really heavy conversations here at our office, because I think he's right. And that's my bold prediction. If your business is entirely social media, it's going to go away in 5 years. You should start thinking about alternative ways to do your life now. That's me. Maybe it's some lofty thinking too, but we'll see.
Hopeful and wishful thinking, right?
Yeah, YouTube and podcast. Hopefully, there's some version of them out there forever. But this crack scrolling, dude, is just not good for us, man.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. Yeah. All right, brother. Well, we'll connect everything up and link everybody to the podcast. I appreciate you, man, and of course our friendship as well. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Hey, can I say something real quick before you get off?
Yes, absolutely.
Watching. I just want to thank you for giving a picture of what it looks like to struggle and then to dust yourself off and then to fall and dust yourself off. And then you're doing something that most men in your situation never, ever do, which is show new smiles and new laughter and new joy, because there's going to be like a high school auditorium full of people ready to poke fun at you or to go, I told you so. If you ever skin your knee again, if you ever fall again. And it takes great courage. I think it takes courage to get up, of course, but it takes more courage to say, I'm living my life again. And that model that you're putting out for the world is really, really important, man. And very, very few people have the courage to do that. So thank you for that.
That means a lot. It's been a struggle, highs and lows, but that means a lot to me, especially coming from you, man. I appreciate it.
Well, the lows that's our currency of the day, right? Is to tell everybody, like they call it there's a term for it, but it's pornography, right? Look how bad everything is, and few people have the courage to actually show. Look how good stuff's going. Like I met somebody, and she's great. My son and I had a great breakfast. We went to Africa, dude. That's amazing, dude. And I appreciate you putting that stuff out. It gives us other men who are struggling, like, dude, it's all right to have a good day too.
Yeah, thank you, man. That means a lot. I appreciate it.
All right, brother. Take care.
You too. John, stand by real quick, okay? Hey, I still got you.
Oh, hold on.
Stand by real quick.
There we go. Yep.
Oh, cool.
I unplugged myself.
Oh, no worries. Hey, man, can you do me one other favor? So speaking to the woman I'm dating, she's a big fan of yours. And I told her, she messaged me and she's like, hey, or she called me. I'm like, hey, I'm jumping on with John right now because I know she's a fan. And she's like, oh, cool. Tell him I was a fan long before I met you. And I said back to her, I was like, no, I'm telling her you're only a fan because of me.
That's right. That's right.
Can you do me
I wouldn't exist. You were one of like 2 people that would have me on your show when I first started this thing. I don't exist,
man.
so
of course
it all goes back to Mickler.
Do me a favor if you don't mind.
Of course.
Just send me a quick audio text, but to her. Her name's Amanda, and just whatever you think. I'm not going to tell you what to say, but just whatever you think. Send me. I'll forward it to her. I think she would really like that.
All right, done. I'll do it right now.
Sweet. Thanks, brother.
Her name's Amanda.
Man. Amanda. Yep.
Excellent. All right. Cool, dude. Appreciate you, brother.
Catch you soon. Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.